Yay. All right. This is defensive ideas from offensive guys. My name is Rob Chuvala. I'm an associate consultant at AccuVant Labs.
I'm Justin Elze. I'm a consultant at AccuVant Labs. Rob and I work together on a lot of engagements.
And really what we were doing here is we wanted to go over a lot of things that we see. This is really for guys that are doing defense right now and may not have an offensive frame of mind or reference point. So we thought maybe we would go through that. And
so there's a lot of low-hanging fruit we see. A lot of things when I got in this industry I was not expecting to see. A lot of basic vulnerabilities like MSO 867, things of that nature that still shouldn't be out there, but they still are. Default passwords. And I talk to defensive people all the time, and they seem to ignore, forget, write off these things as not important. They're trying to, look to the latest technology to fix a problem, yet they're not covering these basic things which are still there and get abused whenever they have a pen test or vulnerability assessment.
Yeah, I mean, we see everything from, start doing something, find their information on Pastebin, and it's still valid, and it's just not anything that they would have ever considered looking at. And like we said, we're trying to make your defense a little bit better. I mean, even if you're one of the big guys, maybe a guy like Jaded Security who, he's got a trademark slogan and he's got keychains and all that stuff, and he's prepared. But even guys like that are going to strike out every once in a while. Okay.
He's back there, by the way. He's the one flipping everybody off, just for reference.
Hi, Boris. So, for the rest of us, that's what this talk is for. I want to start going through and addressing some of the stuff and running through it. So, weak passwords or weaker passwords?
So, default passwords, everybody knows about it. Everybody bitches about it. Everybody complains about it. It's an OWASP. It's always a finding everywhere. The problem with this is a lot of places run vulnerability management programs or scanners. They forget they throw in domain creds. They scan all the boxes, all their servers. They forget and they don't remember that a lot of scanners skip default credential checks, and this is a reoccurring theme we see on a regular basis is everybody scans their network, says, oh, everything's fine, we have a couple vulnerabilities, no big deal. Don't realize that they're skipping the default creds, and we'll come in and there's 30 boxes with SA, or blank passwords and JBoss consoles without passwords. And this is a real common problem, and a lot of places miss this, and their vulnerability management teams don't even consider this an issue. So generally, we suggest people to do a credentialed scan and uncredentialed scan on a regular basis to get full coverage.
Yeah, and then some of the things that people just either don't know what they're running or think it isn't a big deal. And a lot of times, SNMP can give us some of our best information. We can start building user lists if we're going to start brute forcing or see patch level versions, stuff like that. I mean, it's some of the stuff that a lot of people will just kind of ignore and think it's not a big deal. But a lot of this stuff is one little thing adds up and another little thing.
SNMP on Windows boxes tend to see a lot of private keys, and you can enumerate all the processes, see what AV is running. Other software installed, that sort of thing, kind of give you an idea of what you're getting into to avoid AV, or if you can start launching attacks against other machines so you can profile their network quicker.
And then a lot of times, too, with the bigger networks, some of the help desk guys are in charge of pushing out different desktop images. They're using sysprep or something, and every system's going to have the same master password. A lot of times they don't even think of changing it. They don't disable it. And a lot of times they don't understand. Metasploit alone has almost 84 auxiliary modules just for checking default credentials and stuff like that. It doesn't take a lot of time. I mean, once we point it at the stuff and we have an idea of what the network is, it's real easy to run it, put it in the background, and start going on to other stuff like this next thing. So
this is one of my favorite attacks, even though it's incredibly lame and works extremely reliably. NetBIOS spoofing. It's been around for, 8+ years now. People don't think about it, and it really stems from weak passwords. There's always LM hashes or NTLM or NTLM version 2, depending on how people talk about mitigating it, but the root problem ends up being weak passwords. If you do this long enough on a network, you'll end up getting some credentials that work. Basically what happens is when You do a DNS lookup. If the local host file doesn't have it, it passes a DNS. If DNS fails, it does an MBNS request, which is a broadcast on the network. Gets replied to by an attacking machine if I have it set up. With my IP address, I can have you connect into me with SMB, HTTP, and log the credentials, and then attempt to crack them and use them against other machines. It works really reliably on small to medium networks, and it's always one user will have one weak password. So once you get on that machine, it's very easy to literally move around the network.
And once you're on those machines too, everything else will start falling into place.
So we come across a lot of customers who use VLANs, although they don't use ACLs, lack of client-side firewalls, and really flat networks. So we're trying to come up with ways to architect networks to be defendable and help mitigate a bunch of risks. These themes are really common with not using ACLs. People talk about using VLANs, but then they don't filter any traffic between the two. So it's a great mechanism for layer 2 style attacks made in the middle. But again, if you can get from HR to the dev environment without any filters in between, it really widens the attack surface.
So then once we get that, once we get in, it's just a matter of there's a number of tools that we can use. Incognito would be one of them, and we can go and get valid tokens, domain tokens for whoever's been on that machine recently. And then from that point, we may not even have to, we don't have to crack password. We can push hashes and bounce around that way. Then there's other tools that'll help us once we're on the machine to get plain text passwords that are saved there, and it's really trivial to do. And it's using Active Directory kind of against you at that point. It's the beauty of a single sign-on once we have that single sign-on. And if it's just a flat network.
So the way to look at this is if a Windows machine is compromised, all your passwords are compromised. LSAS and a number of other processes store plain text passwords in memory. This has been a beat-up topic pretty well over the past couple of years, but you have to assume that if your Windows machine is compromised, all the passwords in memory can be used to an attacker's advantage. So this is one of those things where you need to not reuse passwords, and even strong passwords in this kind of scenario can still be abused.
So the other thing that we see a lot too is like I was talking about earlier, all the images that are getting pushed out to the network. A lot of times these guys are really overworked. They make a good image. The image works. They don't want to break anything, so it sits there. It's their base image. They don't even consider it a gold image or stuff like that. And like I said, the passwords, the local administrator password is the same through every machine unless somebody specifically goes in and changes it. And a lot of times customers will ask, well how am I supposed to get a different password for every one of my machines? And a lot of times for Dell systems, they have a service tag, and a lot of times what I'll tell, and it's been used to pretty good effect, is just have a master prefix, whatever that complex prefix is, and then add on to it whatever the service tag is. It's not perfect, but it's going to be a tougher situation. And then a help desk guy or anybody goes up to that computer and needs to, for whatever reason, get into it, all they need to know is the master, look at the service tag, and that should be enough.
This is a great time also to work in NIST or CIS benchmark or one of their security standards into your base image. A lot of departments do base images, but they don't take security in mind. Picking NIST or CIS benchmark or one of the other ones and sticking with it and rolling that into your base image gives you an extra level of security rolling forward. Another thing that's often overlooked is network devices. We run up to a lot of Cisco shops, Cisco switches, Cisco routers. People seem to forget that a lot of features are enabled or are shipped by default but not enabled: port security, dynamic ARP inspection, and IP source guard. These technologies help a lot of layer 2 level attacks and rogue devices and that sort of thing. Customers have these things built in. Don't use them. It's free. Set it up once. You build a secure base config for your Cisco devices. You roll it out going forward. It just saves a lot of problems later on. If you ever have a pen test and there's some sort of man-in-the-middle or ARP spoofing attack, these are easy mitigations and they're free.
So another suggestion, a lot of times we'll go in, sometimes these people don't know their networks that well, or they're not aware of what might be on the network. They feel like, well, I need a tool, or management won't buy something for me, and it's real important for them to touch their networks, look at their networks, and know. I mean, if you have SNMP running, are you using it? Is there something that's querying it and you're building a database from it, or is it just running because it was set default on your image? Same thing with NetBIOS and stuff like that. They should look around for this, look for these open ports. And a lot of times what we'll talk about, an easy way of doing it, NMAP, it's free. Maybe a weekly scan. If they run a weekly scan of their network with the output in an XML file, something maybe like the date and day and year, NDIF's built into it as well, and it's going to help you look for open ports, services, or anything that's a little bit wonky on the network. By running NDIF from the week before to your current, the output will be, this port's open, it'll have a big green plus, or if something disappears, it'll have a minus. It's a real easy way for people to see that, and as a defender on the network, it's good for you to try to build your case for management. If you're asking management for, I need a tool to look for this, and they say, well, why, or what's it going to do for me? Using tools like this could be what you need to build your case and sell your managers on something that might work a little bit better, or might be a little bit fancier. But it's a good way of building your case. And then monitoring the network. A lot of people just aren't.
So the problem here is a lot of people log a bunch of white noise. The trick with this is monitoring things that should never happen and using those as indicators of compromise. If you have a machine in HR and suddenly it starts SMB and connecting to every other machine in HR, it's probably a really bad sign. Same thing with RDP. These are things, if you have client-side firewalls turned on or network monitoring, these are events that should never happen and are very good indicators of compromise that you should go after. So trying to narrow down the events to what should and shouldn't happen, and the things that are very bad, act on immediately.
Yeah. And the other thing is that nobody knows your network better than you do. As an attacker, we have to do a lot of intel gathering, and you should have home field advantage and use these things and these baselines so that you can know what is and isn't normal traffic.
Failed login attempts is another one. Oftentimes, as you come into a pen tester, you might grab some credentials, try to replay those against every other machine on the system. It might fail half the time, but nobody notices. That's not an event that anybody cared to log. It's a workstation event. The problem is threats are really coming in from workstations. You get malware, you get a machine pop, and they try to move around from that single machine. You need to be looking for events that directly indicate the compromise.
Yeah, and on that same token too, even successful login sometimes. If Susie is in accounting and she never leaves her desk, and suddenly she's logging into a development computer, that shouldn't be. It's another good indicator of somebody maybe, or a rogue employee, but somebody's doing something perhaps they shouldn't be. So
this is a big one for us. We run up against a lot of clients who have accepted risks. A lot of times in HIPAA environments, you have certified machines. The problem here is they're on the domain, they're on the network, it's a flat network. You need to build controls around these machines. Even if you're accepting a risk or you're claiming it's allowed or they have some write-off from some C-level executive that it's okay, it's still a problem. You need to be able to put in controls around these things. You separate it from the domain, unique passwords, maybe build a legacy domain or a legacy DMZ for machines that you need to keep on the network but can't be patched. This is where you find a lot of MSO 867. It's kind of scary in hospital networks to find this sort of thing, but if you can put ACLs around it and put some kind of controls around it, you can really save yourself a lot of heartache. We come up in environments where it looks secure, but we find these 4 or 5 machines that are unpatched. They're Windows 2000. They have no SA password, but everybody's afraid to touch them in the environment. You need to do something to stop this from being a threat to your network, because people are always going to go after the low-hanging fruit. There's no reason. If the machine's on the network and it's on the domain, it's easy to pick off.
Yeah, and a lot of times too, the argument will be, well, it's not a part of our domain, but it just logs certain stuff. but the manager logs in to get credentials or get information from it for a report or something like that, or the lobby computer it's welcoming guests and the receptionist needs to log into it to put the guest of the day in there.
The next big problem we encounter is outdated Java. There was a Java 0 day every week last year. Nobody has a really good strategy for patching it. They can try to keep up, but they're still ODA on a regular basis. One of the most useful ways we found to help stop or prevent this issue is almost every company now has a proxy or content filter. Take a sample size of a month or 2 months of all the Java requests leaving your organization, create a whitelist off of those, and blacklist all of their Java at that point. Then you can do one-off ticket requests to add other programs using Java, but this kind of keeps you safe for phishing emails and that sort of thing that use Java applets attacking your user base.
And again, it's real important if you don't have budgetary ability, if you got to go through a manager, use the things that you got. There's still a lot of things that are built into a lot of these systems. We're hackers. Figure out how to, to pull the event logs, get the event logs to log more, and try to get that to, use that to your advantage.
A lot of companies have semantic endpoint protection or even just the basic Windows firewall, maybe enabled, maybe not. This is a good place to start, like I said before, detecting behavior that shouldn't happen on network. SMB connections from the HR department to another department or RDP. This is a great place to start logging, understanding that machines on your network will probably get viruses, will probably get hacked. AV's wishy-washy at best at detecting these things. So trying to stop the next course of action if an attacker is there.
And then again, getting to know what events are going to happen in an attack, or like I said before, if you turn your logging up and you get successful logins, if you know that Susie shouldn't be logging in to, again, I go back to the developers or something like that. There's a lot of free tools out there, Kiwi, Syslogger, and stuff like that. You can get it to send certain events to a certain database, look through them, maybe even rifle off something as simple as an SMTP to you if it's a high level. There's some things to know that they can do. When I did this, I was going to go through AppLocker because I thought AppLocker was just a great idea and whitelisting would be awesome. And maybe for you guys it's ready, but it was nearly impossible to set up. The Enhanced Mitigation Experience Toolkit, EMET from Microsoft, it's free, and it's there and it's ready. It's ready now. There's a lot of great places that you can go to look to see how to set it up. It's gonna help protect against DEP and ASLR. So it's going to help protect against data execution and ROPS and CHOP. So a lot of the things that would get triggered when some of these exploits try to run, and it has event log features, so it can write these events. So again, another little quick warning device for you on your network if you start seeing this stuff.
So the latest version of EMET, if you look at a lot of exploits, base their ROP chains off of libraries that don't use ASLR. As long as you're on Vista or above, you can enroll any DLLs or any applications to use a whole bunch of mitigation techniques that aren't always built in. So this is a good way to fight 0 day. There's a couple ways to get around EMET, but you have to write payload specific to get around them, and you don't really see that unless it's extremely targeted attack. So this is a great way to defend if there's new Internet Explorer 0 day and you're stuck using an old version. You can really reduce your risk.
Yeah, and it'll do other things like SSL pinning and stuff like that, so it can help help mitigate man-in-the-middle attacks. And over the years, a lot of the mitigation techniques for some of the 0 days were available before even Microsoft put out a patch. So a lot of times they might have talked about it and say this would have been working for it. And a lot of people have done a lot of this work for you. So, like we were saying before, EMET, Dark Operator had something on pushing out these EMET settings through SUS. Dave Kennedy had a great installation guide over at TrustedSec on running through it, how to get it set up, and he had some suggestions there.
And this is the links to NIST and CIS benchmark. These are just 2 security standards to start with. It really depends on your organization, knowing your environment, knowing what works best for you. But the idea here is to start with a secure deployment of Windows 7, whatever you're going to use, Windows 8, roll in EMET and other tools, and just work security in your desktop. You're trying to save yourself problems later, trying to reduce the attack surface for 0-day and anything else that's out there. So using best practices, which is out there and free, it takes some man hours, but you're not buying a blinky box. It's a lot easier to say, hey, we need 3 weeks of man hours to do this project, instead of saying, hey, we need to go buy this blinky box for $100 grand. So using what you have, using people is a great resource to fix these problems.
Yep.
So if you have any specific questions about any of the tools or anything we talked about, kind of left it open. So you can roll it out application-wise. You can also push out the policies via GPO. The current version of EMET, EMET 4, comes with a bunch of profiles for common applications, Microsoft Office, Chrome, and a number of other things. So previously you had to build a policy around that, but now in the current version of EMET you can build, it comes with default policies. You can add additional applications to push it out. So if you happen to use some cache register software, and it's extremely lightweight, and I haven't come across any problems. I've had a number of customers deploy it without any issues also.
Anything else? Questions, comments, funny stories?
I'm curious if you guys have been hitting any like VDI environments where people want something like Synapse or something like that. How that kind of changes what you're seeing?
Somewhat with virtual desktops. Weird things like their thin clients with default passwords, things like that you run into. Repeating, since usually a lot of those VDI solutions are based off of standard image and they spin up the image every time, you run into static admin passwords. The only positive of those is a lot of VDI solutions blow away the VM on reboot and build a new one. So you're really limiting the impacts of a virus long term, but if somebody got malware, got Metasploit, whatever on the box and was running it, that's why we're moving more towards detection versus threats are always going to get around AV no matter. It's always going to be a cat and mouse game. They're always going to end up on a machine. So trying to stop them from the next step, even planning files or having SMB shares that should never be accessed, using those as Jane tries to access some secret password share, using that to try to detect what happened in our network and then react from there.
Cool.
All right, we're good. Raffle. Did anybody else have a business card and want to win a bottle? Here, we got one more. One more.
Yeah, so this didn't quite work out as planned, so we will give this a shot. And if I'm pulling some of these where people aren't in this room, then we'll just I don't know if it'll.
Yeah, this could take a while, but.
Well, I don't think it's going to take a while because I have a. Yeah, why don't you guys ask some smart questions? Let me try this first.
We'll roll with this and see how it goes.
Oh.
One more.
All right, you did help with the AV, so. All right, man, my big old meats probably can't get in this box, so you want to pull one of those out?
Oh, it's Melinda. She won.
Oh.
Anybody else? Last minute? Okay.
All right. Get on in there and find out if somebody's sitting in the room.
Hey, Melinda, you want a bottle? No. There's a write-in. There's a write-in.
Dax Bale? Yeah.
Swing and a miss.
All right, here, I can get my hand in here. From OnRamp, Jason Brightweiser. No kidding. I might need to see your ID, Mr. OnRamp.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Well,
thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Huh?
Not bad.
Nice.
No, you good.
Go right ahead.
Now I got to do it again.
Women.